afternoon and welcome to the presentation. As you can see from our agenda, we have a broad amount of content to get through. We want to introduce you to the ArcGIS API for Python and show you how it may be used to work with your WebGIS content. We'll then follow to introduce ArcGIS Notebooks, an exciting new ArcGIS Enterprise add-on that embeds Python coding and Jupyter Notebooks within your ArcGIS Enterprise. So let's make a start. Firstly, I wanted to provide some context. So let's look at how Python has evolved within the ArcGIS platform. Python was introduced with ArcGIS Desktop back in 2004, primarily for automation of map production and geoprocessing tasks. From there, scripting and geoprocessing capabilities were steadily enhanced, and during 2010, version 10 was released, and the ArcPy site package had become available to desktop and server. The next significant Python advance came in 2016 with the release of the ArcGIS API for Python, a Python API allowing ready interaction with WebGIS content. And now, in March of this year, ArcGIS Enterprise came with ArcGIS Notebooks, which allows Python notebooks to become part of your enterprise portal. So what is the ArcGIS API for Python? This API is a Python site package called ArcGIS, which allows Python scripts to readily work with WebGIS content. So that's your content within ArcGIS Online or your content within Portal for ArcGIS. So we're talking about an API designed to work with your web maps, services, users, groups, really anything listed as an item within your WebGIS. Being a Python site package, it is imported to the Python environment as you would import the ArcPy site package, for example. It requires at least Python 3.5 and comes with ArcGIS Pro. Alternatively, it's freely downloadable. On the subject of ArcPy, the ArcGIS site package is not a successor to ArcPy. They each serve a purpose in parallel with one another. So the ArcGIS site package is for interaction with WebGIS content, whereas your ArcPy site package is for interaction with desktop GIS. In terms of capability, the ArcGIS API for Python may be used to automate WebGIS administration tasks, publish content, or perform spatial analysis. For example, maps created in a WebGIS may be readily manipulated. We can add or remove layers, modify a renderer, or edit features in a feature service, for example. In terms of administration, the API could be used to perform such tasks as content searches and managing available licenses. And in terms of spatial analysis, we can perform operations such as routing, generation of viewshed, or overlay analysis, for example. Now to explain Jupyter Notebooks. So Jupyter Notebooks is a Python coding environment that runs within a web browser. It's the recommended environment for working with the ArcGIS API for Python, primarily because of its visualization and interactive capabilities. For example, we have the capacity to display a subject web map with analysis results, or display a table of data within our Python code. We can also readily rerun portions of our Python code, and we'll see examples of this in the coming demonstrations. Jupyter is installed with ArcGIS Pro, or alternatively it may be downloaded into a compatible Python 3 environment. When working in Jupyter, we work with Python notebooks files. So these have a .ipynb extension as opposed to the .py extension that you may be familiar with if you've been using Python with Esri products. Let's take a look at a demonstration now. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the Jupyter environment when we start it up. So as we can see, it's in a web browser, and we have one Jupyter notebook file here with a .pynb extension. So if we wanted to create a new Jupyter notebook, it would just be a matter of saying new Python, and I'm just going to keep the first example simple so you can see how the interface works. This here is called a cell, and so we could do something like import the system module. I'll just check the internet connection. Right, let's try. I might just skip that, hold on. No, what I'll do is just skip across to, what I'm going to do is actually just restart Jupyter because it's been sitting here idle for a bit, so that could actually be the source of the problem.
Yeah, it might have just timed out.
So on restarting Jupyter, we'll get a new tab opened up in our browser. As we can see here, I'll go down to the folder where we were working before, and we'll just say new Python. No, for some reason. Okay, I'm going to skip across to...
I'll show an import in my part of the demo as well, so hopefully that one works.
All right, let's try taking a look at a pre-created Python notebook. So this here is using the ArcGIS API for Python package. And what I'm going to do initially is I'm collecting some credentials so I can log into ArcGIS Online. Once I have those credentials, I'll then be logging onto ArcGIS Online here. I'm just entering a password. And then I will execute this cell. So as you can see, we're actually entering our code into individual cells, and we can execute one cell at a time. And this asterisk here is telling us that that cell is actually processing. So that first cell of code there, what it's done is it's logged us into ArcGIS Online, and then I've done a content search. So I'm searching for items owned by myself, Alison, and have Uluru in the title. And we can see 2 item types have been returned. Now what I'd like to do as part of this demonstration is I'm going to actually be replacing my feature layer collection that was listed here. So this next cell here has actually deleted those items out of my ArcGIS Online content. From there, I'm wanting to upload a new CSV file. And I'm actually importing this pandas module here. So this is one of the third-party open source packages that comes when you with the ArcGIS API for Python when you have, say, ArcGIS Pro, for example. And as you can see, it gives us a pretty nice-looking formatted table so we can readily see our data within our Python coding environment. We have our table stored on disk. Now we'd like to actually upload that into ArcGIS Online. So it'll be uploaded, it'll exist as an item in our content, and then we'll create a feature layer collection out of that. And we can see that cell is executing at the moment. We can actually nominate to execute this next cell, and they will then just execute in succession of one another. So what this next cell does is our CSV file is a whole lot of lat-long locations around Uluru. And so what we'll be doing is creating a 3D map, and we'll add that layer of information onto that the 3D representation. And so this gives you an example of those visualization capabilities that I mentioned in the slides. So what we can see here is we have Uluru, and if we wait just a sec, so we can interact with the map as if it was, say, a web map in ArcGIS Online. Here are our points, and we can, of course, like say, identify a feature. So it really is quite interactive. Okay, let's step back to the presentation now. And we'll be moving on to notebooks. Okay, so Notebook Server. ArcGIS Notebook Server is a self-contained Python coding platform, fully integrated within ArcGIS Enterprise and embedded wholly within Portal. It was released earlier this year at Enterprise 10.7 and allows us to have hosted Python notebooks listed like any other item type within Portal's content. Hosted Python notebooks are able to be created and executed within Portal via a Jupyter Notebook environment contained within Portal. Notebook Server is first evident within Portal by the additional Notebooks tab. This tab then takes us to the Jupyter coding interface. It's here that we can experience the perks of Jupyter whilst also drawing on the data sharing and integration benefits of Portal. The available site packages with the ArcGIS within Notebook Server include the ArcGIS site package, ArcPy, plus numerous other third-party packages like the Pandas one that we saw in the last demonstration. So let's have a look now at how ArcGIS Notebook Server differs from a standalone setup of Jupyter Notebooks and the ArcGIS API for Python. On a standalone machine, you may have manually installed Jupyter and then the ArcGIS site package. Or that machine may have server installed or desktop or Pro installed. In either case, you would then have access to ArcPy. Each of these install types are designed to accommodate this individual Python user working on a single machine. When you have ArcGIS notebooks, though, you have a system designed for multiple users. Firstly, multiple users can use a single Python environment. So if you have specific libraries set up in that environment, further users can run one of your Python notebooks without having to set up an environment of their own. Secondly, Python notebooks may be shared with other Portal members and attributed like other Portal items. So the task of managing and distributing notebooks is easier, as it all happens within Portal. Thirdly, ArcGIS Notebooks takes the Jupyter UI and integrates it with Portal content and tools, making coding easier. So data items may be easily added from the Portal content pane and dragged onto the Jupyter coding interface, for example. And Ed is now going to show us an example of that in a Notebook Server demonstration. So we'll just switch over to that now.
All right, thank you, Alison. Let me just find myself. All right, so once you've integrated the Jupyter notebooks into Portal, you will see the first thing you notice is that if your user has the rights, you will have a new tab called Notebook over there. This allows you to create a new notebook similar to what Alison showed in Jupyter. The difference is it now runs inside of Portal, basically inside containers. If you go to your content, you will see that the notebooks will show up like any other Portal item. So if I look at this demo, there's a notebook called test. Here's another notebook. I can go share it, I can favorite, I can view the item details. And if I go into the details, similar to any other Portal item, I can wait for it to load. So you've got the usual, you've got the metadata about the item, the sharing, the owner, where it's deployed. You can open it, download it, share it with other people. Under settings, you are able to change the runtime that's being used. So you get two runtimes, basically, the advanced and standard. Advanced includes ArcPy, where standard is just the Python API. Right, so now if we go, I've already got it open. I just want to refresh this to make sure it's current. And now it doesn't reload. outside here. So these basically, every notebook or session I start will run in a container of its own. It's a Docker container behind the scenes, and they should be completely separated from each other. So whatever I do will not affect another user who's busy with something else. It's my own little playground. So this interface you will see is basically what you can use to code. So in this example, we've got the majestic magpie goose up in Northern Territories. I've got a bunch of observations, but I want to extract a certain area to only show those. So what you'll see immediately, you've got the normal kind of file, edit, copy, view, those kinds of things. But what's pretty cool is you've got add here, where you can go and search for content and easily add it into your scripts. So no need to go and search for it or to type long names. You can simply go here and add one. Under analysis, you've got a bunch of analysis tools ready to go to throw into your script. You can also have geoanalytics tools and raster analysis. If you have them installed, they will show up here. Just a thing to note, any of these analysis you do will not happen on the Jupyter machine, on the notebook server. It will happen on the respective servers. So if you run a raster analysis, the execution and the processing will happen on the raster analysis server in your portal. Right, so let's quickly just go through this script. We've got a little bit of time. So basically, import statement, most of you probably know that. That just says the portal I'm connecting to, the GIS, is the one I'm currently on. So as I was saying, now I've got a data set of magpie geese that were spotted. So that's it. The item is in there. I just looked for it and clicked add. Now I just need to rename this to fit in with my script. So that data set I've added, and that is basically my migration data. Shift enter and it executes that cell. If I made a mistake and I typed it wrong, I can go back and shift enter it again. So now I've got this data set. It shows up. You can click it here to view the metadata, view the portal item. I've got the boundaries for the Kakadu National Park, and I can plot them both on a map. So the nice thing about this is I can play around and down here realize I made a mistake, and I can go back to here and fetch a different item, and I don't have to run the entire script again. I can just run the relevant cells again. So there's a map, and I see there's observations all over the place. I only want the ones that fall within this national park because I'm planning to go there and I'm looking for them. So what I can do now is I can also, from here, analysis, just simply throw in a tool. So I can pick extract data, click on plus, and it will basically generate this for me, and I just fill in the parameters. So in this case, I'm basically extracting it, clipping it to the Kakadu boundary, and I want it to be output in a CSV. If I run that, then I will basically see that the output is written out into this user's content folders. So if I go there, so there's my output. So that's an extraction of the geese within that national park. For the sake of time, I'm giving it back to Alison now.
Thanks, Ed. One thing to be aware of with those Python notebook files is they are just Python files that you could actually export out to a .py file, and you could then run it in a more familiar Python IDE if that was what you were wanting to do. It is exactly the same code. Okay. Okay, moving on to the architecture of ArcGIS notebooks now. So being a system designed for multiple users, Notebook Server uses a sandbox-like approach to provide users with isolated environments. These discrete environments are known as containers and mean that each Notebook Server user is able to be allocated a specific subset of system resources. A third-party product known as Docker is used to create these containers. So if Sam and Ashley were two notebook server users, for example, they would each have their own container to work in with dedicated system resource. If Sam's Python notebook was doing some particularly heavy processing, Ashley's experience in Notebook Server would not be impacted by that intense processing. In terms of a typically configured enterprise deployment with Notebook Server, the architecture could be something like the setup shown here on the screen. A standard base deployment with a hosting server, and then on a further machine, we have Notebook Server, supporting the independently operating containers for each user. This configuration is completely scalable. That is, if greater processing resource was required, the notebook server site may be expanded to include further machines, and hence you would have access to a greater amount of resource. Ed is now going to give us some information in relation to administering Notebook Server.
All right, so as Alison mentioned, every user basically gets their own little container in which they play, a Docker container. Those of you who use ArcGIS Server will be familiar with the REST endpoints for administrating. So you get a similar thing for notebooks. Looks very similar. So the first thing is, okay, there is no UI at the moment, but Esri are planning one. So for now, this is what you use, but eventually there will be a bit of a user interface to it. The first thing is you can check which machines are part of this. Timed out, okay, so this is my machine. And I can go there and actually look at the hardware, inspect it. I can, basically anything related to the machines that form part of this notebook deployment. The next option is notebooks. So here I can see the current notebooks. These two were probably Alison and myself that just had these running. So I can see here this is a notebook. It's owned by the user notebook, which we're using to demo, and I can opt to close it. Over here, I can also view the runtime. So these are the runtimes registered to my notebook server. So I've got the standard and the advanced. You can also register your own runtime here. If you want to add your own libraries, third-party libraries kind of thing, then you would come and set that up here, register a runtime with those libraries, and you can then use them in your scripts in your notebooks. And then the last part, if someone should start abusing your server and constantly using resources, but they are separated. Here you can also see the actual Docker containers that are currently running. So each one of these is basically a little playground that someone can go crazy in. I can also go and terminate it from here. Under system properties is also where you will set most of your configuration settings for the notebooks. So I can have the port number, the sockets, the maximum number of containers, those kinds of things I can come and set up here. That's basically it. It's not that complicated. Relatively straightforward interface.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Okay, one of the last few slides I wanted to, we'll be covering is just covering the subject of licensing. So there's two ArcGIS notebook server license types available, a standard level and an advanced level. They're identical, except that the advanced includes the ArcPy site package, whilst the standard does not. So with advanced, we have ArcGIS, ArcPy, plus the third-party packages. However, with standard, we just have ArcGIS and the third-party packages. And the other difference is that advanced comes with a cost, whereas standard does not. So for an advanced license, you have access to the processing power of ArcPy within its own dedicated environment. This is significant, as Esri has never before given users access to ArcPy on a dedicated machine. This is not just a dedicated machine, but a scalable, dedicated environment, independent of desktop and independent of ArcGIS server. So if you have ArcPy scripts that you traditionally are like very intensive and you've had trouble with memory and that type of thing in your environment, this possibly could be an option for you. Finally, some words in relation to the future. So ArcGIS Notebooks is planned to become available within ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, and also Insights. And it will offer a similar user experience to that which we've seen within Portal, for example, so you're getting Jupyter notebooks within those environments. In terms of timelines, the Pro release is planned for late January 2020, online sometime in Q1, whilst Insight timeframes are still to be confirmed. And there's also a link there if you'd like to be involved in the beta program. To sum up then, a few takeaways. The ArcGIS API for Python allows users to readily work with WebGIS content. Secondly, ArcGIS Notebooks allows Python notebooks to be embedded completely within your Portal environment. Thirdly, ArcGIS Notebooks is advantageous because it provides a completely scalable scripting environment. And finally, ArcGIS Notebooks is unique because it allows you to code with ArcPy in a dedicated environment. Thanks for coming along to the session. There's a few further resources there, and I think we'll switch across to questions.